There's tons of studies out there around how much the Bitcoin network actually is consuming. What is your, what study or what data point do you use if you had to measure it on the global energy consumption? Is there a number that you point to? I usually look at the number that is 0.1% of total global energy consumption. What do you use when thinking about this?
Yeah, we use Cambridge University's numbers, which lays it out. But they come in about a 0.5%. And that's really importantly, that's end user electricity, right? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd be interested to know your denominator and your numerator. But I think if you're using base primary energy coming into a country, that would be like the theoretical energy content of a barrel of oil. You got to convert that to electricity or other things. You lose most of it in the conversion. So the relevant number should be electricity that's usable by end users, right? And that's also really important in climate because the world has to electrify everything, right? That's the challenge here. It's incredibly hard. It's going to take a long time. And then, so that total global number is going to be 23 petawatt hours, right? And Bitcoin's coming in at 130 terawatt hours. That's about 0.5%.
So when you think about this, one of the things that to me is fascinating is even if transaction fees exploded, which is part of the miners' revenue, even if Bitcoin's price exploded and so there was a bigger economic incentive for people to mine, and today, there's $40 million or so miners are being paid per day globally. If that exploded upwards and it went to $200 billion, right, in a given year that they were actually pulling in from an economic incentive standpoint. The thing that I always jump to is even with that $200 billion of economic incentive, they couldn't buy more than 1% of the global energy, right? Just $200 billion as their revenue. If they went and spend every single dollar buying energy, and so they made no profit, it still would only get you about 0.9% based on the numbers I've looked at. So how do you think about, even with the revenue that they get, it ends up just being a limiting factor on how much energy they could purchase in the future?
Well, I don't get where you're coming from with that. I mean, they could set up shop in Saudi Arabia and basically, be the number one customer, right? If the Saudis wanted to do that. Look, the big problem, that's a big number right now, 130 trillion watt hours, but that's up 10x in 5 years. That's the alarming part here, right? And why is that? It's because the price has gone up, right? You had two halvings in those 5 years, by the way. You go out another 5 years of that, you're going to be using more electricity than in Japan, right? You're going to be at 1 petawatt hour. That's 4% of the world's end user electricity, right? That's a problem. That's a big problem. If you look at people fighting climate, you can't ignore that, right? And again, I would just say, if that happens, that's in 5 years, worse climate in 5 years, it's going to be worse, right? Because we're way behind the curve here. There's just no way that companies and liquidity providers aren't going to be they're going to be picketed. They're going to be scared to death. It's going to be like what happened in Russia here, where all these, it's not just sanctions, but the companies move out. And that's going to be devastating to the growth of Bitcoin. That's what you hit that wall, right? So that's why change the code and change the proof of work. Don't go to proof of stake. Change the proof of work. Flip the equation there, right? You got that mining infrastructure nobody else has that. Imagine those things sucking carbon out if they were incented to suck carbon out or maybe produce renewable energies. Now, I get it, right? Right now, you got a beautiful solution and you don't have to prove the work. The result proves the work, right? It's math. You got to figure out a different way if you're going to be counting CO2 sucked out or renewable energy pumped in for free to the grid. Imagine if you had that, right? But again, bottom line, if people can make money like they have been on Bitcoin and it's helping the climate, that's unstoppable. That's carbon coin. That's the mythical carbon coin right there.
So to get to 4% energy consumption globally, it would cost about $800 billion. And the miners just don't have that money. I think that's where the Bitcoin community says, well, hold on a second. Even if fees spiked and Bitcoin went up 100x, they literally wouldn't have enough money to buy 4% of global energy. And so I think that when I look at this, the other key piece to this is that the legacy finance system, I think you and I both would agree on this, is pretty non-controversial. The more users, the more transactions, the more transaction volume, the more energy consumption. There's a very linear relationship, right? You need more ATMs, you need more banks, you need more data centers, all this type of stuff to support more users. With Bitcoin, one of the interesting things is that the layer one, a single line or a single transaction in that block could represent me sending you 1 Bitcoin, so two-party transaction, a single transaction, or it could represent billions of dollars of economic value and hundreds of transactions on the layer 2, like in the Lightning Network. And so if we scale out the Lightning Network at the layer 2, now all of a sudden, there is not a linear relationship. To support more users or more transactions, we don't actually need to consume more power. How do you think about that as one of the Bitcoiners' arguments in terms of why there isn't this linear relationship between more users and more energy consumption?
Well, first of all, I disagree with your first calculation there. Look, if the prices, or if the energy use is up 10x, if it's 4%, yeah, you can buy that energy. You can afford it. It's proportional to what you're seeing today, right? It's the same equation. They're going to spend up to, some profit margin, and that's the driver. As far as, kind of if it's one transaction, look, you're still securing the network. There's still this race to solve that puzzle. And people are going to spend up until the point where they make a decent return. The thing is, yeah, you're right. The legacy systems use energy, but they need to be working, and many of them are, to reduce it as much as they can. And the only point here is, so does the Bitcoin protocol. And again, it's in the interest of the Bitcoin community to do that, right? And if you can invent a better form of proof of work, for example, that either gets to neutral or gets to negative, is the holy grail, right? Then do it, right? Why aren't we doing that? That's the thing I don't get. The trillions of dollars in this industry, right? The billions of dollars the miners were. Why is there a crack team here that's supported by the Bitcoin Mining Association? That's all they're doing is they're working on a new breakthrough code base that would solve this problem. There's so much money, there's so much talent. We can do this, right? But
I think
why are we doing it?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, so using your example, without any halvings, if there was still 900 Bitcoin per day coming in and price was up 10x, so the miner revenue was up 10x, it would still only be $146 billion. And so if miners went and spent every single dollar on energy, they still couldn't buy 1% of the global energy. So 10x increase in price, $146 billion of total miner revenue globally in a given year, they couldn't spend all $146 billion and buy 1%. And I think that's where one of the big questions is, maybe energy costs come down some way, but it's hard for me to see them getting their hands on $800 billion, spending 100% of it and buying 4% of the energy production.
You're using a different denominator. You're using that primary incoming, theoretical energy in a barrel of oil, for example. The relevant number, in my opinion, should be Cambridge University number, which is the electricity use. That's, again, 23 petawatt hours, whatever it is. Also, by the way, if it goes up 10x, the price is probably more than that. You got a halving in there. But again, track record is 10x in 5 years. Continue that out. And look, I believe anybody who said price isn't going to continue to, I don't buy it. I think it will. The track record is there. We have to assume the problem gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And they can't afford it because the money's there.